What's up guys, we're back again today with another video in our transmission build series. In part 1, we went ahead and got the bell housing squared away. Part 2, we got everything from the intermediate clutches down, assembled and put together. Today in part 3, we're going to be going ahead and assembling the direct drum, forward drum, and oil pump. So without further ado, let's get started. One thing I forgot to mention at the end of the last video, we need to check the clearance of our intermediate clutch packs. So what you do is you just put a feeler gauge in between the bottom of the pressure plate right here and that top clutch, and you can check that gap with a feeler gauge. According to my manual valve body install sheet, they say you want it to be between 30 and 50 thousandths. I ended up checking this with a feeler gauge and it was right at 42 thousandths, so we're almost dead in the middle, so we're good to go there. Alright, we're going to start on the direct drum first. So I already disassembled everything. Here's all the parts laying out. And first things first, before we get started on any of this, we're going to get rid of about half of this. We'll be replacing it with new stuff, so we'll get that out of the way first. Our 3 seals, we don't need those anymore. We can toss them. All of our piston springs, we'll be replacing with new ones. We can get those out of here. Our old 16 element sprag and our 2 races, we're going to be replacing that with a 34 element sprag. So that can go. Our bigger snap ring, we're going to be replacing this with the 4L80E spiral lock. That can go. We're going to keep all this over here. We're going to keep our snap ring. Keep that. We have all new clutches and steels. We just need to keep our top plate. And we can get rid of all this. So now that we've gotten rid of everything we don't need, I'll go ahead and clean all this up. And we're going to do the dual feed mod on the direct drum, so we need to drill a hole in that before we get it too cleaned up. So we'll get started on that next. Now before we get this direct drum super cleaned up, the one thing we're going to do is we're going to drill a hole in it to do the dual feed mod. That's why we left our second ring off of our center support. So if you look here, we have our check ball down inside the drum right there. It's right there. We're going to go ahead and drill a 1/16 of an inch hole 180 degrees from that. So over here, we're going to get as close to this inside edge as we can. We'll drill it kind of like at a 45-degree angle, like this, all the way through. That way we have a nice little bleed hole right there. So I'll go ahead and center punch it and get my drill, and we'll just drill that hole right there and we'll be good to go. Alright, we've got our 1/16 inch hole drilled right there. If you look on the back side, it comes out right there. So we're good to go there. I'm going to go ahead and clean this direct drum up, and then we'll come back and start getting everything put together. Now that we have our direct drum drilled and cleaned up, we can go ahead and start assembling it. One thing I wanted to talk about though before we go ahead and assemble it, there's 2 different styles of direct drums. If you'll notice right here, this ring, see how it's nice and smooth all the way around? This is called a smooth style direct drum, and it uses a sprag style clutch, just like this. There's also a notch style drum, so there'd be notches in this ring all the way around, and that is for a roller type clutch. You want to go ahead and use the sprag type if you're doing any sort of high performance, and then this is a 34 element upgraded sprag. It comes normally with a 16. So if your transmission doesn't have this, a lot of guys will buy this drum separately. I got lucky, mine already came with a smooth style drum, so we're good there. So we can install our 34 element sprag. So how we're going to do that is we have these races. We're going to drop our bottom one on, just like that. We're then going to take our sprag and put it in there, just like that. We can then drop our sprag on. Now that we have our sprag on, we know it's on the right direction because we should be able to freely turn it clockwise, but not counterclockwise. Now that we have our sprag in place, we can take our other race, set it in there on top of the sprag. We can then take our cap. We want it to go in with this dish side facing up. These two tabs will fit down into the top of the direct drum, just like that. Seat it into place. Then we can take our upgraded 4L ADE spiral lock and put it down into place. And there we have it. Once again, we'll check it one more time. You want to make sure it spins freely clockwise, but not counterclockwise. So we're good to go there. We'll go ahead and flip it over and start on the other side. Now we need to install our lip seals onto our piston. And this piston might look a little different than yours. There's two different ones. There's a cast aluminum one and a steel one. This is the steel one. So if yours looks slightly different, don't worry, you have the aluminum one. So there's two lip seals that go in the piston, and there's one that goes down to the direct drum itself. The medium sized one is the one that goes into the direct drum. Because we are doing the dual feed mod, we are not going to be using this one. So we're going to set this one off to the side, and we'll need to put our two lip seals into our piston. For our lip seals, both of them are going to be installed with our lip facing this way or down. So if we look at our inside one, we have our lip right there on the inside. It's going to go in just like this. Now to put our piston in, it's going to be the same thing as before. We're going to set it down in there. And we're going to use our lip wizard tool to go around and seat our two lip seals, excuse me. Go around the outside. Put a slight downward pressure on it. Alright, we got our two lip seals seated in. Sorry for not showing you how I always put these lip seals in, but to be honest, I'm not very good at it. And you don't want to watch me struggle with it for 10 minutes. So, we got them in, no big deal. Next we'll drop in whatever this piece is called. If you have the aluminum one, you don't have this piece. Alright, now that's done. Now we can go ahead and drop our new springs in. These are the springs that came with the valve body, so we'll use these. Now that our springs are in place, we'll grab our retainer cap, drop it down in, and I will go get the compressor tool set up and we'll compress this and put our snap ring on. Now that we have our direct drum assembled, we can go ahead and compress the piston and install our retaining snap ring. To do that, they make a compressor tool. It's basically like a little press that you can hand screw down on. It'll compress the rings, you can put the snap ring on. I don't like them, so I kind of made my own tool out of one of them. So we got it set up here in the press. I'll go ahead and compress it, put the snap ring on, and we should be good to go. So here's the piston compressor tool I was talking about earlier. This is a pretty cheap one, so I didn't mind modifying it. Normally it comes like this. You can see where I cut it right there on the all thread. And then these two bars just slide on to our steel round bar. And then you can slide them in and out, adjust your width, and you can twist them, do whatever you want with them. And then you'll screw your handle down on top and it'll press everything down. The reason I don't like these is because these move around too much, I think. And also, as you're tightening this down, you're twisting this all thread. So the whole thing wants to twist on top of the cap. And being that these aren't fixed in place, they like to move around a lot. And the first time I actually used one of these, as I was tightening it down, the two bars kicked out like this. and the spring cap came flying off. The springs went everywhere. It's just a pain. I don't like doing it. So I just took it, cut it off right there on the all thread, and tacked these two little steel bars into place on this steel round bar. The only downside of doing it this way is it's kind of a fixed size right here. We're not going to change it any, but this whole thing was like 29, 30 bucks, so I'm not too worried about it. I think this is a lot better. So I just set this down on the press, set a piece of flat bar across the top, and then I'll come down, press in the center of it, and I think it works much, much better this way. There's nothing wrong with using this. I just personally don't like it. Now that we have our snap ring in place, we can move on to our clutches and steels. One thing I want to talk about real quick before we do that though, if you'll notice on our spring cap right here, we have these 4 little bumps right there. You want the gap of the snap ring to go in between 2 of these bumps. That way it's fully supported all the way around. You don't want your gap on one of these bumps right there because then it's not as supported. So our gap is right here. It's between this one and that one. So we're good to go there. Now we can move on to the steels and clutches. We're going to go ahead and dry assemble them, and then we can check our clearance, and then we'll take them back apart, cover them in transmission fluid, put it back together. There's a variety of different direct drum clutch stack-ups depending on which year transmission you have. The most common is 5 90,000 steels and 5 clutches. You can also build a high-capacity direct drum stack-up, which is 6 78,000 thick steels and 6 clutches. So it'll give you an extra steel and an extra clutch with using the thinner ones. Typically you want to install it how you took it apart. This one just so happened to have 6 90,000 steels and 6 clutches. So I'm going to go ahead and put the same thing back in here. We'll check our play. We might need to tweak it a little bit, but we'll try that out first. So I'll just go ahead and start with a steel. Like I said, these ones are the 90,000 thick. Drop it down in there. We'll then put our clutch in. Like I said, we're assembling this dry for now, so there's no transmission fluid on any of this. We'll drop in our next steel. As you can see, these are actually the steels that came out of the direct drum. We're just putting them back in. I want to see what the clearance was to begin with, so we're going to use these steels and put them back in. But I did check them. They are still 90,000s. They're not worn down or anything, so drop that one down into place. Now that our direct drum is dry assembled, we want to go ahead and check the gap between the bottom of the backing plate and the clutch underneath of it. To do that, we're going to use a set of feeler gauges. I like using these bent ones just because I think they're a little easier to get in there. This gap, we want it to be a minimum of 15 thousandths. However, for a higher horsepower application like this, we want it to be really somewhere between 30 and 60 thousandths. I'm going to shoot for 50. And if you'll notice, we have a 14 thousandths feeler gauge there. Hopefully you can see that. It will not fit in there. A 13 was pretty tight to try and get in. A 12 went in semi-easily, but a 14 does not go. So at some point somebody's taken this apart, rebuilt the direct drum, and they added an extra steel and clutch, and there just wasn't enough clearance. I kind of figured this was going to be the case because I actually noticed this last night and talked to Jake's. I called them up and they said that if there's 6 clutches in here, more than likely it should be 6 of the 78 thousandths thick steels and not the 90s. So no big deal. I'm going to take this back apart. We're going to replace all of the 90,000 steels with 78s, and then we'll go ahead and check it again. Alright, we're back again. It's a couple hours later. As you can see, I ended up removing the springs and the spring cap out of there. It's just a little bit easier to check the feeler gauges without that spring cap in the way. So I ended up swapping out the 90,000 steels for the 78,000 steels, put it back together and checked it, and I ended up with some crazy number like 100 thousandths of clearance or something like that. So what I did is I ended up taking out 3 of the 78 thousandths and replacing them with 3 of the 90 thousandths. So in here we have 3 78,000 steels, 3 90,000 steels, and then obviously 6 clutches. And I think I misspoke in the last video. I said we wanted 50 thousandths of clearance. You actually want 60. You want about 8 to 10 thousandths per clutch. So we're going for about 60, not 50. So I end up getting my feeler gauges in there. And I'll show you. So I have a 26, a 20, and a 16. That is 62 thousandths. And 62 thousandths fits in there snugly. So we're good there. I'm gonna go ahead and take this back apart. I'll put the springs and the cap back on, let these frictions soak in some fluid for a little while, and then we can go ahead and fully assemble the direct drum and drop it in. Usually before you install the direct drum into the case, you would go ahead and drop in your intermediate band. So there's one right there. Because of the trans brake I'm using, I'm not going to be using this band, so we'll leave it out. So since we're not putting this in, we can go ahead and move on to installing our direct drum. We can now install a direct drum into the transmission case. One thing you want to make sure to make your life a little easier is you want to try and get your intermediate clutches as lined up as possible. It takes a little bit of messing around to get the direct drum to fully seat in there, but we'll see if we can't get it and get it filmed. Alright, the direct drum is now fully seated in place. As you can see, I took the steels and clutches back out so I can get my hand in there and move it a little bit easier. Two ways you can tell it is fully seated. You probably can't see it on video, but if you look down in here, the top of the intermediate shaft will line up flush with the spline portion inside here of the direct drum, which they are. We're flush right there. Also, if you lift it up and drop, if you lift it up just slightly and drop it, you can hear the metal on metal. Hear that thud? If you're hitting on one of your clutches, it'll sound like metal on plastic. But that is steel on steel right there. So we got it fully seated into place. I'll go ahead and put the clutches and steels back in, and then we'll be good to go there. We can move on to our forward drum. Alright, we got the steels and clutches back in, we're good to go. One thing I found helpful that I thought maybe I could share, maybe if it helps somebody else out. When trying to line up this direct drum, I found it worked pretty good. If you'll see, there's a little bit of circular movement right there. And you can also kind of wiggle it back and forth. I mean, not much, but just a little. I found if you pushed it one way and spun it, and then I kept just trying different spots. I'd push on that side and twist a little bit. And then eventually you would find a spot where it would kind of, I don't know if it was the downward pressure plus twisting it a little bit, kind of got it helped lined up a little bit easier. But that worked for me. I don't know if that works for everybody, but I thought that was pretty helpful. Once I started doing that, it actually got lined up pretty quick. Next, we're going to start disassembling our forward drum. We're going to start by removing the outer snap ring right here. We can then go ahead and remove all of our clutches and steels. Next, we'll pull our little clip out of here. There's that. And we'll get our clutch hub and remove the two little thrust washers on there. Okay, so for our forward clutch hub, we had those two thrust washers that we took off. If you notice, mine, the top one was plastic, the bottom one was bronze. We have two new bronze ones to replace them with, but one thing I noticed, and I'm not sure if it matters, the top one, the one that came off of right here, there it is right there, compared to the one from the bottom. If you'll notice, we lay them over top of each other. The bottom one is wider this direction. Hopefully you can see the difference in the width of those two washers right there. So when we go and put them back together, we want to remember that the narrower washer goes on the top of the clutch hub right there, and the wider one goes on this bottom side right there. Next, we can take the forward drum over to the press, compress our spring cap, take our snap ring off, let the pressure off. We can remove the springs, and then we can remove the piston underneath and take the lip seals off of it. It's the exact same thing as the direct drum, so I'm not going to film it. I'll just go ahead and knock it out real quick. Now that we have our forward drum completely disassembled, we can go ahead and start rebuilding it. One thing I want to talk about before we do that though, here's all the old parts, and if you look over here, these are the parts we're going to be replacing it with. So I have a new direct drum right here. This is the heavy duty one, so there's that. Moving on down here, I have the Sonax. There's the part number right there, 240 7098. This is our heavy duty clutch hub. Comes with this Torrington bearing. There's that. We have new clutches and steels right there. Our two new thrust washers and our two new lip seals. So we'll go ahead and start rebuilding it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a 60 thousandths hole in the forward drum, just like we did in the direct drum. So I'll flip this over. I'll drill it on the opposite side of our check ball, right there. Drill it through, so I'll go ahead and do that first, and then we'll come back. Now that we have our hole drilled in our forward drum, we can go ahead and install the lip seals onto our piston and use the lip wizard to get it into the forward drum. One thing I wanted to mention that I think I forgot to mention on the installation of the direct drum, if you look over here on the forward drum, there's a check ball right there. You can have a check ball either in your drum or in your piston, but you cannot have it in both. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you're mixing and matching parts from different transmissions. It doesn't matter which one it's in, but you cannot have it in both. So if you have one in each of them, you need to set screw the hole. That way you only have one check ball in this assembly. Same thing for the direct drum. We only have one. There's no check ball in this piston, and we have one in the drum, so we're good to go there. So I'll go ahead, install the lip seals, and get this thing set down into place. Now that we have our piston seated down into place, we'll do the same thing as the direct drum. We'll go ahead and install the little clip here, and then we'll dry stack our steels and clutches in and check our clearance. Now that everything's dry assembled, we can go ahead and check our clearance of our steels and clutches. I already went ahead and did it. I talked to Jake's. They recommend 10 thousandths per clutch. There's 5 clutches, so they say about 50 to 70 thousandths is where you want to be on a performance build like this. I already went ahead and checked it, and I got, you see we have a 26, a 20, and a 16. So that gives us 64 thousandths. It fits in there tight. So I'm going to call that good. I ended up taking out one of the 90 thousandths steels and putting a 78 thousandths one in. 590s, it was just not quite enough clearance. So I took one out, replaced it, and we should be good to go there. So I'm going to go ahead, pull this apart, and we can move on to installing the springs and spring cap. Now that we have our springs and our clutches and steels installed into the forward drum, we can go ahead and move on to the clutch hub assembly. So first we're going to take our bronze washer, set it on right there. We will then grab our clutch hub and work it down into place. We can then take our bearing that comes in our kit. We want to install this with the black side facing down, just like that. We can now go ahead and drop our backing plate on. Followed by our snap ring. Now that we have our forward drum installed, there's 3 ways we can check to make sure it's fully seated. First, and the most common way, the same thing we did with a direct drum, you can lift it up slightly and drop it. And if you hear, that's the sound of metal on metal. If you hear like a dull thud, you know it's hitting on one of the clutches and it's not fully seated. Second, you can reach your hand down in here and feel. There should be no gap between the forward drum and the direct drum. So we're good to go there. The third way, and I have not verified it for myself, you should be able to check from the top of the bell housing to the top of the shaft right here, and it should be approximately an inch and 3/8. Like I said, I have not done it for myself. I don't know if it works or not, but that's what I've read online. They say that's a good way to check it too. Now that our forward drum is installed, we can go ahead and start on our oil pump. We'll start by removing these two sealing rings and the thrust washer right here. Next, we can remove the 5 bolts that hold our 2 halves together. Next, we'll pull out our 2 pump gears and inspect those. All in all, the gears don't look too bad. One thing I want to show before, you want to remember which way these went in. So on your inner gear, you'll see we have the little dots there. They're facing up. On the outer gear, we have this little mark right there. That was facing down. So that was like this. And then our inner gear with the dots are facing up, just like that. So that's how those came out. Set those off the side. We'll now remove our seal down in here. The last thing we need to disassemble is our boost valve. It's kind of hard to get to. There's a snap ring in here you need to take out, and this thing's under a lot of spring tension. One thing I saw somebody else do online, I'm going to try it. I put a 5/16 bolt in there, put a clamp on it, squeeze it down just enough to compress the spring a little bit. We'll go in there with our snap ring pliers and see if we can't get it out. Alright, we got our boost valve assembly out right there. I ended up not using the bolt. What I did is I just took one of these squeeze clamps, tightened it down just like this on the higher side. That way when I took the snap ring out, when this piston goes to shoot out, it'll catch, hit on the bottom of this clamp. It'll keep everything from shooting out and shooting apart. Then after you get the snap ring off, you can lightly let the clamp off and pull everything out. It worked pretty good that way. We'll try and use the bolt method by putting the bolt in there and pressing down whenever we go to install it, because obviously we need to press the boost valve down deeper than the snap ring sits. So we'll try that. Now that we got everything apart, we can go ahead and take this half. You can see it's still covered in aluminum dust from when we did the bell housing. I need to clean this up. It's pretty ugly underneath. I'll probably paint it. We have a bushing and a seal in here that need removed. This side we have 2 bushings, one on each end, that need changed out. Clean this up as well. And then we need to tap a 5/16 hole right there for our 5/16 set screw. That's going to lower our discharge pressure. We'll go into that here in a couple minutes, but I'm going to go ahead, clean this up, probably paint it, knock these 2 seals out, and then we'll come back. Alright, just figured I'd stop for a second and show you guys where I'm at. So we got the front pump cover here. I went ahead and knocked the front seal and the bushing out already, cleaned it up. We got a coat of paint on there. That's drying. You can see there's the old front seal and the old bushing I knocked out. There's the 2 new ones right there. Moving on to our pump. I already knocked these bushings out as well. I did make sure to check the depth of them before I knocked them out. So there's the 2 old ones. There's the 2 new ones. I just wanted to show you guys the set screw right there. So this is a brass 5/16 18 by 1/2 inch long set screw. The 1/2 inch length, I don't think that's too important. You could probably go a little longer or a little shorter. This is a 10-pack of brass. They're $6 from McMaster-Carr. If you don't want to wait for the brass ones to come in, you can go to your hardware store and just get a steel one. One thing I would recommend though, if you're going to get a steel set screw, get a couple extra drill bits, because you do need to drill a hole all the way through the set screw, and some of those steel set screws can be pretty hard. So get a couple extra drill bits if you're going to do that. If you'll notice, you can see, hopefully you can see the hole all the way through it. So what I did is I went ahead and ran a 5/16 cut tap through the hole. You don't need to drill it out bigger or anything, it's already the right size. Ran my tap through, threaded the set screw in, and then I drilled a 7/64 or 109 thousandths hole all the way through it. I didn't Loctite it in place yet just because I want to be able to pull it out, clean the chips out behind it. But there we have it right there. The main thing you want to keep an eye on is you want this set screw to sit below this surface right here. You don't want to stick it up higher, it'll interfere. So we have ours well below the surface right there. We're good to go there. I'm going to go ahead and pull this set screw out, clean the whole thing up. I'll press the new bushings in to depth. I'll go ahead and Loctite and reinstall the set screw. We'll wait for the paint to dry on the cover and we should be good to go. I went ahead and installed the front pump bushing. I just put a little dab of Loctite on each side and pressed it down into place flush with a 65mm seal driver. Like I said, just press it down in there flush with this lip right there. Now that's done, we can go ahead and press in our front seal just like this. So I'll do the same thing, put a little dab of Loctite on each side, set it down in there, and then I'll grab the 74mm tool and press it down into place just like that. Now that our front seal is installed, we can go ahead and flip it over, and we're going to reinstall our gears, making sure to put them back the same way we took them out. We'll grab a little bit of assembly lube to put on them as we put them back in. So once again, we had this gear, that little timing mark right there was facing down just like this. So we'll put that one in there just like that. We'll then take our inner gear with those little timing dots right there facing up. The last thing I'm going to do is lay a straight edge across this pump right here. You want to make sure that these gears aren't sticking up. And I can see we're good to go there. So now we'll go ahead and attach our two pump halves back together. Now there's 5 bolts on the top right here. There's 2 short ones and 3 long ones. Pretty self-explanatory where they go. 3 long ones will go up here. We have these little posts. 2 short ones down here. So let's go ahead and get the 5 bolts in. We're going to start them in and we're just going to finger tighten them. And I'll show you why. Now I've tightened each of these bolts just as tight as I can with my fingers with a socket. What I'm going to do is come back and loosen each one about a 1/4 of a turn. And I don't know if you can see that or not, but you'll see how the 2 halves have a little bit of play. back and forth and directional. We're going to line these two halves up perfectly because our sealing ring goes around here. So I'll grab the tool and we'll go ahead and do that real quick. Now what we want to do here is I have this alignment ring right there. It's basically just a band clamp. I got it off Amazon. It was like 16 bucks. There's the packaging if you need it. This is for a 4L60, 400, 350, 700R I believe, a couple other ones. But what it does, we can put it on there, tighten it down right here, and it will line up these two halves of the pump. You can use just a band clamp from the home store if you can find one. I think you need one about 9 inches, but like I said, I just bought this on Amazon. It was cheap, came the next day, so no big deal there. So we got this on there. We're gonna go ahead and tighten it up. Now that we have our band on, lining up our two halves, I'm gonna go ahead, snug these back down. And then I'll go ahead and torque each of these bolts down to 18 foot-pounds. Now that we have our two halves lined up, we can go ahead and install our regulator valve. We're going to reinstall it in the exact opposite order we took it apart. So you'll see all of this go in just like this. So if this side is the snap ring, this side is the back, it'll go in just like so. Our horseshoe washer goes on there first. And then our little spring retainer washer goes on there first with the little teeth sticking out like that. We had our old spring that went on just like this. We're going to be replacing this spring with the new spring that our valve body kit came with. So that'll go on there instead. But assuming this is the old spring, assuming this is the new spring, it'll go on just like this, just like that. And then we'll have this right there. This little shaft right here will be facing in towards the spring. And then we'll have our little cup. This drops into there, just like that. That'll go right there. We'll then compress everything. This side will face out towards the snap ring. And the snap ring will go on the outside like this. I am going to be using the bolt method like we used to take it apart. So I'll get a C-clamp on right here. We'll put a bolt on the end and we'll squeeze it in. That should compress it far enough in that we can get the snap ring in. So I'll go ahead and put some assembly lube on everything. That way everything's nice and lubricated. We'll try and collapse it and get that snap ring installed. Next, we're going to install our two sealing rings up top. You can see I already have the first one in. Next, we're going to take the old washer that came off of the oil pump and we're going to measure this thickness. Our rebuild kit comes with a whole variety of different thicknesses and we'll use these to adjust our end play. But for now, we're just going to use the same thickness that came off of there. So we'll measure it. And we are about 83 thousandths. So we'll find the one that matches. Once we found the correct one, we're going to drop it on there. Just like that. Lastly, we're going to install our seal around the outside. Before installing the oil pump, we want to make sure our gear selector is in place and good to go. So we have our shift shaft right here. It'll go in through here, through our shift shaft seal. We have our bracket on the outside. Make sure everything's in functioning order as it should be. Your shaft will go through here. Your gear selector mounts right there. There's a nut on this side, make sure to tighten it down. You have your rod that comes down through here. The spring right here, when you push it forward, the spring should collapse. This rod needs to be above the parking pawl right here, and your retainer needs to be on just like this. If you install this thing backwards, your car will not hold when you put it in the park position. So it needs to be installed like this. Now that we have this whole thing installed, we can go ahead and move on to installing the oil pump. Now we can go ahead and install our oil pump. As you'll see right here, I have two studs to help locate the oil pump as we put it in. These are just two 5/16 by 2.5 inch long bolts that I just cut the heads off and put a nice little chamfer on this side. So we got both of those screwed in right there. We'll grab our pump gasket. Put it down on there. Now that that's in place, we can go ahead and drop our pump on. Now that we have our pump in, we can install our gasket for the bell housing. I'll go ahead and install our 6 bolts and washers, and then we can go ahead and check our in-play. Alright, we got everything set up to check our in-play right here. If you'll notice, I just took a piece of 1/8 inch flat bar, drilled 2 holes in it, ran a bolt and a nut through my bell housing bolts. I have my magnetic indicator base on top of that, and we run the indicator down to the top of this shaft. That's how we're going to check our in-play. What you want to do is lift this shaft up, and it'll tell you how much it moves right here, what our in-play is. If you'll notice, we're on 0 right now. If I lift on it, it's not moving at all. So we have no in-play right now. I think that's because I forgot the Sonax heavy-duty forward clutch hub that we put in is actually like 25 thousandths longer to help reduce some of your in-play. So I think that probably kind of took away some of our in-play a little bit there. So what I'm going to do is pull this back apart, pull the pump off. I'll replace that washer on the bottom of the pump with one of the thinner ones, and we'll go ahead and put it back together and check our in-play then, see if it's a little bit better. Alright, so we're back. It's a couple hours later. I actually ended up having a couple problems with this. I did need a thinner washer on the bottom. Mine was too thick, but also the bushings that we pressed into the shaft earlier were binding up. I think they were a little too tight, so that way the pump wouldn't fully seat to the forward drum, and whenever you were trying to move this shaft, it was binding up, and I was reading no end play. So I ended up getting that fixed and switched to the thinner washer. And now if we check it, you can see our gauge, we're set at 0. And if I come around and lift up on our shaft right here, we get about 11 thousandths. Maybe 12, call it 11 and a half. So we are good to go there. Another thing a lot of people say is you want to put a jack or some sort of something on the bottom to put pressure up on the output shaft, because if you're getting a very big measurement here, that could be the problem. So put something underneath and put a little bit of pressure up on the output shaft, and that should give you your true reading. For me, I put a bottle jack underneath, and I got the same reading either way, so I don't know. So I'm gonna call that good. 11 thousandths is, I'm happy with that. The tolerance varies depending on where you get it from. I've seen everything from 4 to 22 thousandths to 7 to 19 thousandths. My rebuild book actually says 15 to 30 thousandths for a stock rebuild. So 11 thousandths is good. We're right in the middle of all those tolerances, kind of. The one thing, the tighter it is, the better, within reason. That translates to more fluid getting back to the planetaries, less of it leaking out, longer transmission life, all that good stuff. So I'm happy with 11 thousandths. That's where I wanted to be, so we're good there. I'm going to go ahead and pull these bolts out, put a little bit of blue Loctite on them, and then torque them down to spec. I think ATI says you want them to be at 22 foot-pounds. So I'll go ahead and do that, and that should finish everything out. Alright, there we have it. The only other thing I did was I Loctited and installed our 2 set screws right here, being this is a 6-bolt case, unfortunately. Obviously, if you have an 8-bolt case, you have 2 bolts there. If not, you put the set screws in. So those are Loctited in place and good to go. And there we have it. Starting to look like a transmission now. Super happy with how we're looking right now. In the next video series, we're going to go ahead and get the valve body, the pan, modulator valve, tail housing, all of our sensors, and the rest of it done. And hopefully, by the end of the next video, we'll have a complete transmission. Like I said, super happy so far, so everything's looking good. Make sure you guys come back for the next video. I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you next time.